So I thought we'd begin by talking about texts and thinkers. Then we'll do a little bit of Q&A and then jump right back in. So many of you probably already know that we don't actually have that much by the Stoics. We have lots of book titles, but we've lost anywhere from 90 to 95% because we don't even know how long these books were of the available Stoic literature, including some books that were specifically about virtues and vices, which would be really nice to have. But we don't have our hands on them. And it may be the case someday down the line that, with the recovery of scrolls at Herculaneum, that we find some of this stuff. Or there could be some monastery library that hasn't yet been explored where some of this stuff can be found, or who knows. But for the most part, I think we can say what we've got is what we've got. So what do we have? Most of the literature that we have by Stoics is what we call the late or Roman imperial Stoa. So these are people that you're familiar with, like Seneca or Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius, the big three that often get talked about. We also have Musonius Rufus, who is the teacher of Epictetus. We have some stuff from this guy Hierocles, and what do we have from them when it comes to looking at virtues and vices? So Seneca is an important source. We've got a lot of his stuff. As a matter of fact, you could actually say that the majority of the Stoic literature that we do have is Seneca. And quite a few of his letters are going to reference virtue. Some of his treatises are relevant to that. And they tell us more specifics about the virtues and vices. Musonius Rufus is another important source. He's a contemporary of Seneca. He has some lectures that some of which have to do with virtue and fill out the picture. Epictetus might seem to be less directly useful. He doesn't talk about virtue much, but he talks about all sorts of other things that are connected to it, like what he calls proairesis, often translated as the faculty of choice or, moral purpose or things like that. The various prolepses or general concepts, which include the what's in our control, what's not in our control. That's only one of many of them. And, he focuses on other things, but what he has to say will be useful for us. Marcus Aurelius, he has some interesting things to say about the virtues and vices here and there. He's not a systematic writer. He didn't write the Meditations to You and Me. He wrote it for himself. And so we can't really complain too much about him not having organized it. Well, he was also a very busy guy, right? Running the empire at the time. And then we got this guy Hierocles. He's actually not very helpful when it comes to virtue and vice because he doesn't, in the bits and pieces we have from him, we've got this elements of ethics, part of which is fragmentary, and then we've got a number of portions of text that were preserved by Stobaeus. Really nothing in there that's useful about virtue. But we do have some other really helpful sources. So one of the most important ones is Cicero. Cicero himself wasn't a Stoic, and he does criticize them on some points, but he also thinks they have a lot of things right. And he admired some of them, like his friend Cato, his teacher's teacher Panaetius, he's going to take a work from and make it better in On Duties, at least according to him. We don't have the original, so we can't really say. And so when it comes to Stoic ethics and virtues and vices, On Duties is a really important work. We're going to talk about that quite a bit in coming weeks. But also this book On the Ends is important. There's a book called The Stoic Paradoxes itself, very short, and Cicero is presenting some of their key ideas. And then there's this Tusculan Disputations, which in book 3 and 4, it's stuff that's kind of useful. I mean, all of it's interesting, so you can definitely read it if you want to, but some is more germane. And he does discuss the Stoics in other works, but those aren't really about virtue. Those are about cosmology or epistemology. So, for example, On the Nature of the Gods has a Stoic presenting the Stoic theology. So that might be of interest to you, but it's not going to be directly applicable here. And then there's two other works that you're going to see me referencing quite a bit, and I'm creating handouts to sort of summarize these two and correlate them. So one is by this guy, Arius Didymus. He was actually a Stoic, and he writes an epitome of Stoic ethics. He also writes an epitome of peripatetic ethics and Platonist ethics. So he was into summaries, right? And if you've read it, you know that it's a lot of ideas all packed in there with almost no argument or explanation. It's just the Stoics believe this, and then jump to the next topic. It's still useful, and it tracks with stuff that we know from other thinkers as well. Then we've got Diogenes Laertes, who's not a Stoic. He's writing a much bigger project called Lives of the Philosophers. He does have a chapter on the Stoic, or a book on the Stoics with a chapter that summarizes their doctrines, and it kind of correlates well with what Arius is doing. Sometimes they use different terminology. And so we're going to draw on that. And then, and this will be more important later on in week 6, you also learn stuff about people by looking at those who are criticizing them. Because in ancient times, you would say, so like Plutarch, on the self-contradictions of the Stoics. Look at what these crazy Stoics are saying. And he'll quote it verbatim, and then he'll say, and here's why it's such a crazy doctrine and can't work. Well, he did us a favor by telling us what he thinks or what has been reported as the doctrines of the Stoics. So, we get quite a few people like that. We're mostly interested in Plutarch, but there's also this Aristotelian Alexander of Aphrodisias who tackled them, Sextus Empiricus, who's a skeptic. There's even a medical author that you might find interesting, not so much in terms of virtue, but like emotions, Galen, who was the doctor to not Musonius Rufus, to Marcus Aurelius. And, he likes the Stoics and doesn't like them in certain respects. Much later on, there's this Neoplatonist Simplicius. And then if we go a little bit beyond the scope of the class, there's also some early Christian authors who tell us interesting things about the Stoics in a similar way. They're usually a little bit further away in time. So Lactantius, Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Augustine. Now we're getting, further away. Boethius, even further away into the early Middle Ages. They've read Stoic stuff. And so, they agree with them on some things and disagree with them on other things. So that's sort of a thumbnail sketch of the literature. Now,